It's such a great honor to be here. It was wonderful to see people raise their hand for KOPN, that you are subscribers, listeners, members. I hope all of you become then. And I was just handed a little note that said, Democracy Now! Is also on CATV here in Columbia. What, anyone know what time? It's on cable television. So check it out. We're on television and radio here, and of course on satellite TV. Oh, it's wonderful to be here in Columbia. And also wonderful to know that there is a journalism school here that has 1,000 students. How much potential they have to not only document the world, but to change it, as you all do, no matter what it is that you do. And it really matters at this critical juncture. From global warring to global warming, to the global economic meltdown, to the lack of health care in this country. These are the critical issues that we need an open, independent media to deal with. I see the media as a huge kitchen table that stretches across the globe, that we all sit around and debate and discuss the most important issues of the day. War and peace, life and death. And anything less than that is a disservice to the servicemen and women of this country, because they can't have these debates on military bases. They rely on us in civilian society to decide whether they live or die, whether they are sent to kill or be killed. Anything less than that is a disservice to a democratic society. On this 9th anniversary of the invasion of Afghanistan, we need a free and open media that tells the truth. I also appreciate coming here tonight and seeing you'll have a teach-in on Afghanistan tomorrow, and I hope everyone participates in that as well. We begin breaking the sound barrier. I wrote it with, well, my editor is Dennis Moynihan, longtime colleague at Democracy Now!, with a scene from the United Nations. I'm going to be at the United Nations on Tuesday night, introducing a film on war. But this begins in 2003, right around the time of the invasion of Iraq. And it's the scene right outside the UN Security Council, where a large tapestry has hung for decades. It's the tapestry of Pablo Picasso's Guernica. You know, that famous painting. He painted it in a 21-day frenzy when the Spanish town of Guernica was bombed. It was under Franco, the dictator. It has become a famous anti-war symbol because it shows the agony of war, etched in the faces of the animals and the people that he depicts. He said it could never be brought back to Spain as long as Franco was in power. And so he had in Paris these weavers make 3 tapestry reproductions because he was afraid the painting would get destroyed as it traveled the world. And it's one of those tapestries that's hung in front of the UN Security Council. So this was about the time of Colin Powell, then Secretary of State, giving his push for war at the United Nations. That was the final nail in the coffin for so many. As, you know, many people were suspect of what President Bush said, but Colin Powell, so many more trusted. And he garnered support around the world around a lie. Weapons of mass destruction. Said they had all the evidence when they didn't. But that tapestry, during this time, not only of the Secretary of State giving his pro-war announcements, but many others as well, it wasn't lost on the US and UN authorities, the irony of this tapestry, this anti-war statement being the backdrop of all these pro-war statements. So they shrouded the tapestry with a blue curtain.
I think it's our job in the media to pull those curtains back, to show the reality of war. Could you imagine if for just 1 week we saw the images of war? Above the fold of every surviving newspaper in this country, photographs and stories. The photographs of babies dead on the ground. On the homepage of every website, pictures of soldiers dead and dying. The top of every radio and television newscast in this country, women with their legs blown off by drones if they're lucky enough to survive. Could you imagine if we were inundated with this for just 1 week? Americans are a compassionate people. They would say, no, war is not the answer to conflict in the 21st century. I originally come from Pacifica Radio, which was founded almost 62 years ago in Berkeley, California. A war resistor named Lou Hill came out of the detention camps after World War II and said there's got to be a media outlet that is not run by corporations that profit from war, but run by journalists and artists. And that's how Pacifica was born. The first station was KPFA in Berkeley, 1949. The second station, KPFK in Los Angeles, 1959. The third station, my station in New York, WBAI, celebrating its golden anniversary, 1960. It went on the air. WPFW was the last of the stations in Washington, 1977. The fourth station, 1970, 40 years ago, Houston, Texas, KPFT went on the air. It's the only radio station in the country whose transmitter was blown up. It went on the air in March of 1970, and several months later, the Ku Klux Klan strapped dynamite to the base of the transmitter and blew it to smithereens. And when they got back on their feet and rebuilt that transmitter, they blew it up again. I think the silver lining was clearly Pacifica did not have any money for advertising. It certainly blew it into the consciousness of the potential listening audience of the people of Houston. Talking about going in with a bang. Well, I can't remember if it was the Exalted Cyclops or the Grand Dragon. I often confuse their titles. But he said it was his proudest act. I think because he understood how dangerous independent media is. Dangerous because it allows people to speak for themselves. And there is nothing more powerful. When you hear a Palestinian child or an Israeli grandmother, you hear an aunt from Iraq or an uncle from Pakistan or a grandfather in Afghanistan. That breaks down caricatures and stereotypes that fuel the hate groups. In this country, when you hear or watch a Muslim speaking on TV, really, that's the beginning, and it is so rare. Instead, all we get on all of the networks is the small circle of pundits who know so little about so much, explaining the world to us and getting it so wrong. People speaking from their own experience. And then you say, oh, that sounds like my baby or my bubba or my aunt, my uncle. It sounds like the cousin I cannot stand. But it's not about agreeing with each other. It's just about hearing where people come from. And that's when you start to build common ground. I always think about the Secretary of War in World War II, Stimson. When they made up the list of cities in Japan to dropped the atomic bomb. It's an astounding story, the dawn of the nuclear age. But when they made up that list, one of the cities on the list was Kyoto. Stimson saw the list and said no, immediately crossed it off. Why, they said. And he said, because my wife and I visited there, and we love that city. Now, I think that's very profound. He still saw Japan as the enemy. He still planned on dropping the bomb. So theoretically, philosophically, politically, he was ready to take aim. But there was this one place he knew, and he said, the art there, the architecture, we couldn't destroy the city. That's the power of independent media.